So it did affect you then?
It certainly did.
Yeah.
And when I subscribed to Creation Magazine and got some of the
Plug.
answers that, that we're talking about on this show, that's
Right.
what we want to reveal on this show, answering those tough questions that I didn't have when
Right.
I was in high school, college, afterwards, getting into the workforce and so on. Now, you had a different story.
Yes, I never grew up in the Christian, in a Christian church, never went to youth group, never read the Bible, didn't know anything about it. And so when I went to school, they gave me an answer to question number one. Where do we come from? We evolved. And they had charts and graphs and books. And it was funny because when I would bump into Christians who would, and try to invite me to youth group or ask me if I went to church, I was fairly immunized against the gospel because they were trying to give me a different history and a different idea of where we came from, which, I already had an answer. I already knew we evolved. That was the history I believed. And so I didn't really see any value in what they were talking about.
That's right.
And I'd been equipped very early on to hit them with hard questions. And so when somebody would bump into me and say,
You mean the Christians?
Oh, yeah.
Hit the Christians with hard questions.
Exactly.
Okay.
They'd
Yeah.
say, hey, you want to go to youth group? And I'd be very cynical, like, youth group, like church? Oh, yeah. And I'd be like, oh, you believe the Bible? And they'd be like, oh, yeah. And I'd be like, so you think some guy got 2 of every kind of animal on a big boat, and there's millions of animals in the world.
Popular question.
How would you possibly do that? And they would just, most of the time, just turn around and squeak, 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 kind of run away.
No answer.
No answer.
No.
And it reinforced what I'd been actually taught, a kind of a caricature of what the Christians were. They didn't have answers for their faith. They just had a blind faith. And people would say to me, you got to have more faith to believe in evolution than to believe in God. I'd laugh. I'd say, look, I got my biology book and my geology book, and I got Discovery Channel, and I got PBS. I thought there were all these facts for evolution and no facts.
So specifically, what were some of the facts that you were taught?
Well, I can remember being taught things like, vestigial organs, that, things like your appendix, that was just an evolutionary throwback. You just had these organs inside you that,
It's a leftover from when we were a previous animal in our evolutionary history. That's the idea, right?
And I mean, of course, today we know that, especially during, when your baby's being formed in the womb, that the appendix is vital at that time. It has a very specific function, and there aren't really many evolutionists anymore that would say, oh yeah, that's a vestigial organ. At one time there was over 100 vestigial organs listed in books, and of course they've dwindled down and they don't really exist anymore.
Like at the time of the Scopes trial in Dayton, Tennessee, 1925, there was a book published with I think over 100.
Yeah.
Amazing. Today there's none.
And yeah, your thyroid gland was once a vestigial organ. I'd like to use that. Things like, embryonic recapitulation. Supposedly that in the womb you retraced your evolutionary ancestry. So the baby started kind of like a worm and then turned into a little bit like an amphibian and kind of like a fish and onward, upward, and it was kind of like a pig. And I remember seeing diagrams in books. This is the way the baby forms. And I thought, well, that's proof of evolution. Look at that.
Okay.
Well,
so that's changed too. I mean, most evolutionists don't accept that today anymore.
Right.
But they still use it in places like abortion clinics.
Right.
Where they tell the young girls, oh, you're not cutting up a human. You're not killing a human. It's something on the way to becoming human.
It's at the fish stage or something. And again, you see that link between morality and your belief in where you come from.
Right.
And something that I got taught as fact has now totally changed. The facts have changed. Ape men, I remember being taught that. So many things that I was taught that now evolutionists themselves have thrown out and said, no, we don't really believe that anymore. But once it was presented as fact.
Right. And the fossil record is proof of evolution. I mean, we hear that from a number of people. Why do you believe in evolution?
Right.
Well, the fossils.
That's
And
right.
we're going to do a program on fossils and
yeah.
how fossils form and so on. That's coming up.
Yeah.
And that's apparently some kind of proof for evolution. Well, there are fossils.
That's right.
Fossils take millions of years to form. Apparently, they show a sequence of evolution over millions of years as they were buried and fossilized and so on.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of different explanations for the fossil record.
That's right. Perhaps maybe we can have one of our other speakers from Canada come in, and Dr. Emil Silvestri.
We'll see if we can get Emil on the show.
He's
PhD in geology, former atheist,
right?
Who recognized that given the conditions of a global flood, you can interpret things differently, like the fossil record and strata layers and so on, many different things. In fact, there are quite a number of folks on our staff who were once atheists.
Right.
Dr. Carl Whelan, I'm just thinking of him, founded Creation Magazine in 1978 on his typewriter.
Yeah.
He was an atheist. Before that time, he would do kind of what you did. He would criticize Christians for trying to marry millions of years in evolution with Genesis.
He could see
he could see the problems with it. That's right.
And as I talk to people that are non-believers, they do that. They'll say things like, well, you cherry pick the Bible. You like this part here about the salvation of Jesus and he's a nice guy, but what about this part here?
Right. I got a quote here from Martin Luther. I love this quote. If I profess with the loudest voice and clearest exposition every portion of the Word of God except precisely that little point which the world and the devil are at that moment attacking, I'm not confessing Christ, however boldly I may be professing Him. Where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proved, and to be steady on all other battlefronts besides is mere flight and disgrace if he flinches at that point. This is not a side issue.
That's right.
And we'll talk more about it next week.
Martin Luther, the great church reformer, once said that Christians need to be engaged in the main battles that the church is facing, helping to make a difference where the battle rages. Today, the battle rages in the area of creation versus evolution. Genesis is the most attacked area in the Bible, and most Christians cannot answer simple questions about Adam and Eve, Noah and the flood, dinosaurs in the Bible, and so on. Christians need to get equipped in this vital area, and Creation Ministries International exists to do just that. Visit our website at www.creationontheweb.com to find logical, scientifically accurate answers to questions about Genesis. Creation Ministries International staff, many from a wide variety of scientific disciplines, have produced thousands of articles now available in a massive online database. www.creationontheweb.org has grown to become the world's most powerful internet resource on the creation evolution issue. There are more than 5,000 articles already online, and new articles are added daily. Some of the topics covered include the feasibility of Noah's Ark and the evidence for a global flood, the age of the earth from both the Bible and science, scientific arguments against the Big Bang and models that explain observations in astronomy within a young Earth time frame, recent discoveries that support dinosaurs fitting with biblical history, evidence from biology that shows that the type of change that is observed in living things has absolutely nothing to do with evolution, and many more topics. These thousands of articles are available for free 24 hours a day to anyone on Earth with an internet connection. Genesis is one of the most attacked areas of the Bible. CreationOnTheWeb.org provides logical, scientifically accurate counterattacks in this area. As 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5 says, "We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God." Got questions? Get answers at CreationOnTheWeb.org.
Over nearly 30 years of ministry, our ministry has received many, many questions from folks that had questions about the creation evolution issue. Now nowadays, back when I started getting into this issue, there was no website. There was no, internet was just in its infancy, and I didn't have the internet resource that we have today. We've got a website called creationontheweb.org with over 4,000 articles that people can look at on that website. Now, every once in a while, there are feedback emails that come in from people who've scanned the website, and they've got some understanding of what we're saying and what our scientists are writing about. But there's additional challenges. Let's call them challenges. And so we want to talk a little bit about some of those challenges that come our way every once in a while that aren't necessarily picked up by the articles that are already on the website. Here's one here. This is from a couple years ago, Bomb Building versus the Biblical Foundation. Kind of an interesting title, but what it's referring to is we wrote an article about all the school shootings and that kind of thing.
The violence that we see.
Violence in the schools. There have been recurrences of this since that time. And we wrote an article that said, well, basically all you need to do is teach a child, teach a student, that he's a product of evolution, that there's no God, the Bible's not true, there's no absolute right or wrong, and they'll do what they want.
Which is right where we started when we talked about question number 1, where do we come from? Question number 2, what's the meaning of life? Well, if there's no God, there's no purpose for your life. You are the result of a random chance accident. Most accidents are unfortunate. There is no meaning to life. And when you die, well,
There's no judgment coming
there's
when
no
you die.
repercussions for anything that
If you can get away with it, why not do what you want?
Right. So that was our position. That's what we wrote the article about.
We had a challenge to that. A fellow wrote in, and basically the foundation of his article was that the biblical foundation is unnecessary for ethics.
Okay.
You can be a nice person without the Bible.
Right.
You can be an atheist and be a nice person. Okay. I'll read some excerpts here from what he wrote in. He said, "You wrote that in order to create an explosive child, all that was required was to educate the child to believe that we evolved from animals, life is an accident, and that there are no absolutes." Yeah, that's what we wrote.
Right.
"In short, I am to you a walking time bomb. I am, in fact, a diligent, hardworking, caring, stable, compassionate, intelligent, kind, thoughtful, considerate individual, as are many, many of my like-minded friends all around the world. We manage to live the lives your religion postulates without the need for pomp and scripture, the fear and hatred, and the presence of any kind of omnipresent deity to keep us in check. I wondered how you would explain this."
Right.
And our scientists answered back, and you can read this on the website, and the basic premise of the response back was something like this. Our argument is not that atheists cannot live good lives,
Right.
but that they have no objective basis for living a good life.
Right.
And Bertrand Russell, who is a famous atheist, wrote books and so on quite a number of years ago. Now, he's an atheist, just like this fellow who wrote in this
Right.
feedback here via the website. And he says this: "I don't have any justification for distinguishing good and bad," is what he means by justification,
Right.
"any more than I have when I distinguish between blue and yellow."
So
But like, he's being consistent, though.
Right, right.
He's an atheist, and he recognizes that there is no basis, if you're an atheist, if evolution is true, the Bible's not true, there's no God, there's no basis for distinguishing between what is right and what is wrong.
because everything has equal value then, because it's just a random chance mixture. We might say, well, that's right, this is wrong, but we live in a society now that actually teaches that. You know, that's your truth, this is my truth.
Right.
Don't impose your
Yes.
truth on me, and this is what Bertrand Russell's saying. So, again, you know, I've got a quote here from an atheist. At the time, Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know if anybody remembers.
Jeffrey Dahmer, yeah.
He's
For I guess viewers who don't know Jeffrey Dahmer, he was a serial killer in Milwaukee in the early 90s.
Yep.
In the USA, and he killed a whole bunch of people. Some of them he cut them up and ate them. He was into cannibalism
yeah.
and a number of other things, quite disgusting.
Really horrible things. But in an interview with Stone Phillips on Dateline NBC in 1994, before he died, he said this. He said, "If a person doesn't think there's a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges?" That's how I thought anyway. "I always believed the theory of evolution is truth, that we all just came from the slime, and when we died, you know, there was nothing." You see, I've used this quote, and I use it when I'm speaking, and sometimes people will say, well, you know, I know a Christian, or someone who called themselves a Christian, and they did bad things. And I say,
right, yeah.
Exactly. And they say, well, what do you mean? I say, well, when they call themselves a Christian, they attached moral absolutes to them. They were going to be a follower of Christ and do the things Jesus taught. And when they went away from them, when they outside those boundaries, you call them a hypocrite. But Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't a hypocrite.
No.
His belief system in question number one, where he came from, lined up exactly with his actions. And so you couldn't really call him a hypocrite. You might want to call him bad, but where does the concept of bad even come from?
Well, his idea was, there's no judgment for me. I just came from the slime. When I die, I'm just going to go back to the slime.
Right.
There's no judgment for me. So far from being a side issue, this is one of the most critical issues that a person can think about and study.
Exactly.
And that's what our ministry provides, the kind of study materials and the answers to those tough questions about the creation-evolution issue.
That's right.
And we're not saying that all atheists will be equally bad, but it's not a side issue. That's the main point.